12 to the South Lafourche Legislative District. The order, please. Brian, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Keith Gizzard.
Here.
Ronald Collins.
Here.
Roland Jerome.
Here.
Mitch Dennis.
Here.
Brett Roach.
Here.
Roland Gizzard. Brian Lawrence.
Here.
McNeely Rowe.
Here.
Lonnie Williams. Mr. President,
All right, thank you. Okay, gentlemen, you've been presented with the minutes of the regular meeting on May 8th, 2023. That's a motion to approve those minutes. Moved by Mr. Roland Curol, second by Mr. Ronald. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Again, we presented the minutes of the special meeting we had for May 25th. Moved by Mr. Ronald, second by Mitch. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On the president's report, I really have nothing to report right now. We'll move on to the executive committee, Mr. Ronald.
The executive committee met on the 31st, President Ronald Colley, Monty Bag, Keith Kidry, and Nick Mathern. Mr. Roland Gizzard was out due to sickness. We call the meeting to order. Financial report, review the finance for the past 2 months. Mr. Mathern discussed his plans for revising the format of the financial reports in the future. He updated the committee on the status of repairs to the main building, indicating we're not likely to be ready for move before July 2023. In anticipation of location move, Mr. Mathern presented the committee with a recommendation for replacement of office furniture and other contents damaged by Hurricane Ida. He informed the committee that IAT Insurance Group has issued a check for balance of contents covered in the amount of $23,620. Preliminary estimates on required furniture and equipment total $26, so we're about $2,400 short. Mr. Mathern informed the committee that the staff would be working to have firm quotes on all equipment and furniture before the union board meeting for the board to review and approve the purchasing of all equipment necessary to reoccupy the building when available. In addition to all this furniture and equipment able to be either be quoted by 3 vendors or purchased under state contract, Mr. Mathern also informed the board that he would be working with local carpenters to obtain at least 3 quotes on rebuilding a council-type desk for the board meeting room, to include spaces for the commissioners, the general manager, and the minute clerk. We also have carpenters provide quotes on building a podium for the members of the public and representatives of engineering firms to present updates to the board, but they can be also recorded on the meeting video. He also agreed with the committee on current disagreements with state legislature on the issue of raising the state's annual spending cap for the current and following fiscal year. Senate concurrent resolution number 3, proposing a raise in the spending cap, passed the Senate. Senate unanimously on Monday 29th passed it on the 29th. Discussion concluded with the recommendation that Mr. inform our local representatives of funding that would be at risk should the spending cap be left in place. He also informed the committee that residents who use the road boat launch along the intercoastal waterway off Delta Farms Road have regularly used that levee or the borders boat launch parking lot as additional parking space. He recommended that no parking signs be installed along the edge of the levee the boat launch in accordance with SLOD ordinance number 2, restricting the use of levee by the public. The committee recommended Mr. Mathern coordinate with the parish council members representing that area to see whether the parish could install the signs. With no other item for discussion, the meeting is joined by Monty Bag, seconded by Keith, and unanimously carried.
Okay, thank you. We didn't get that accepted. All right. Anybody from the audience here to address the board?
Yeah, I want to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to let you guys know that the people voted to consolidate drainage from 1, 5, and 6. Six, really has no funding. That's up in the north somewhere, the parish in the Chack area, I believe. It never really had a board. They was always looking for people to serve on the board for the last 5, 6 years. Never could get anybody but one. So it really was never functionable, but they didn't have any funding. The funding is in 5 and 1. And I can tell you, they're trying to consolidate this, but the money that's in 1 as we speak, that's money that was generated before all this happened. So I'm just giving you some advice that I know y'all need some funding, some help with that siphon, I believe, somewhere around South Lafourche. So if I was you guys, I would send somebody over there and see about getting some funding, because they have a substantial amount of money left. And that money cannot be put in a parish coffers, because that was all generated before it became one. And the council's gonna be voting on proposed orders, which it goes in automatic, and then we ratify that in a couple of weeks. But I will have an amendment, whether it will pass or not, I have no idea. But my theory is, let them finish spending their money where it needs to be spent. And I'll say this publicly. The parish cannot handle what they had total, and now they're gonna take over Drainage District 5, 6, and 1, in which they were always doing a good job and they were fair to everybody in the district, and they had projects throughout the district. And now it's all gonna be turned over to the parish. And yours truly was the chairman of the board, Brian. He got in there a few years ago. Mr. Albert Gibby was there for a long time, and Mr. Grimio. And all them guys did a real good job. And it was always fair. But now it's gonna come to an end. But they're not gonna take that $3 million or better and just go straight to the parish. That is designed and designated for those areas. And the same thing with 5. Those guys are on 5, District 5.
And where's District 5?
District 5 is Lafourche Crossing on 308 all the way to the parish line. They just bought a brand new excavator. They have their own CPA. They have 3 people that work for them, and all that's coming to an end. And these guys are not happy, I can tell you that. And they're looking for a lawyer, that's all I can say. Okay?
Yeah.
So who should we get with? Who should we meet with?
I think they came one time, and if he gets his stuff together, because the only one that came Thursday when we had the meeting was the mayor of Lafourche. He left with 200,000.
Maybe they didn't make an eye, I think.
But I'm sure he's gonna have his facts together. I mean, you could get some assistance, I can tell you that.
We could always use some assistance. And I
Okay,
appreciate
buddy.
you.
So I let you know, because they ain't gonna let you know.
That's
okay.
Appreciate it. All right.
Mr. President, if I could follow up on that, I did go to the previous meeting. I know there are some issues, like Mr. Lorraine's pointing out, some disagreements as to whether those boards are gonna be allowed to continue or not. And our parish administration is questioning, not say the legality, but in their opinion, the ethics of trying to spend all that money rapidly. And I know that if they do try to, let's say for instance, like the situation Ms. Lorraine's talking about, the parish council is going to be voting in the next 2 meetings. Was it, the ordinances were proposed already, or they're about to be proposed?
No, the
to
ordinance is
dissolve?
gonna be proposed Tuesday
Okay.
night and finalized.
So it'll be another month before those boards are dissolved, if that's the way it goes. And I know the current parish administration was prepared to take legal action if they tried to spend all that money. Whether they were right or wrong or had a leg to stand on, that's not for me to decide. It's, if that happens, for the courts to decide. If it ends up being that the parish council votes to allow them to continue until their funds run out, like Ms. Lorraine said, there's $3 million there. I mean, that's plenty of time for us to be able to use that money, not worrying about what happens if that board gets disbanded, what happens to those agreements over time. So there's a lot of potential depending on what happens with the parish council within the next month.
And that's the meeting tomorrow? Right?
Tuesday, tomorrow night. It's just a proposal.
Okay.
So it's not going to be a discussion tomorrow night. It's just proposed to allow the public to have 2 weeks' notice that this is going to be an ordinance coming up for vote for the council at the following meeting.
You'll keep,
Oh, I'm on time. And we did mention that exact project that Ms. Lorraine's talking about at the meeting. I know John was there, he was able to back me up with some information on the progress of the siphon or weir, whichever way you guys decide to go on that. So they are aware of that project specifically, that's a very near-term need that we would have in our district, and it would be something that I think they would be in support of funding.
Anything else, Dan?
No, I got a lot more, but I'm gonna pass.
What's new? We appreciate it. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you got more than that added to the ordinance.
Anyone else from the audience? All right, moving over to our general manager's report. Nick?
Thank you, Mr. President. So first up, Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office has been, last week they held a program for some high school students called Future Leaders of Lafourche. They met with the parish president, the DA, the assessor. They met here down locally with me. They met with the port, just to kind of give these high school, junior, seniors an idea of the opportunities that we have in Lafourche Parish, whether that's being a business owner, whether that's working for the public, whether that's working with the public, and just to give them a better understanding of how government works and the opportunities that are in our community. And so we were asked to give a presentation and explain to them what we do here in the South Lafourche levee system. So that went really well, and then they took off and had the afternoon at Port Fourchon, getting to see all those operations there. So that was a really cool opportunity. They're going to do another week of that camp in July. We'll be participating in that also. We did conduct our road barrier closure exercises on May 23rd, and that was to make sure that we've got everything in order ahead of hurricane season for the road barrier closure on Highway 3235 on La Rose, across the 4-lane, and across LA1 at the Leontario Lock Complex, that swing gate down there. So that whole exercise went very well. We had no issues putting up the equipment. We had no issues that we could see in terms of how that equipment's going to be functioning if needed, hopefully not during storm time. And we did have some cooperation from the Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office this time. We did work with the Sheriff's Office on trying to figure out, in the actual case of an emergency, when we would need to close the road here on 3235, you can see we actually do have, maybe you can't see, we did have sheriff's deputies on site that day helping to direct traffic. Because in the instance that we have to close this road, this is the northbound lane of 3235, this southbound lane becomes two-way traffic. And so we have cones that'll be arriving pretty soon to be put along the center line to bring everybody's awareness that that's two-way traffic. We're also going to have road closed and detour signs where that takes place, and a few stop signs at Burglar Rose Highway also to help facilitate traffic there. And that request came from the Sheriff's Office just because when an actual emergency is happening, we're trying to do evacuations, they need every deputy that they can spare to be available. And so the closure exercise, like I said, went very well, and we anticipate doing it earlier and earlier, I think, in the future when it's not so hot, not necessary to be out there in the heat. And it also gives more time if we target the late February, early March timeframe, that if something does go wrong, it gives us a lot of time to order replacement parts, get it in, repairs done way ahead of hurricane season, instead of waiting this long like we did this year. Next we had as you guys approved last meeting, to reshape the Yankee Canal levee. Like we reported last time, our grass cutters had noticed that there were some spots that had been washed out on the backside. We were worried about damaging equipment when we run bush hogs over there because the washouts are pretty substantial. And so we hired Compo and Sons to chop and reshape this levee. As you can see, I mean, they did an excellent job. It's super smooth, really well done. And here, Rowdy Pierce, one of our employees, is seeding that after it was completed. So that's in very good shape and should perform really well in the future. Just need some rain. As Mr. Colley mentioned, there have been some issues reported with the LaRose boat launch. There's a parish boat launch on Delta Farms, along Delta Farms Road on the Intracoastal Canal. We obviously have our ordinance number 2 that prohibits any vehicles that are not levee district or our contractors from coming onto our levee. These here are not as bad as, say, this kind of a situation where we have a boat trailer all the way up on the levee, potentially damaging the wall, and then if our grass cutters are coming around, can't maintain the levee, we're having issues. So I did bring it to the executive committee to try to work with the parish to bring up a no parking ordinance there, because it's the parish's boat launch, and to me that seemed like it should be a parish issue. I initially contacted the parish administrator, public works director, to let them know what was going on. I was told that because they didn't have an ordinance and it would be a quote-unquote ordeal to get something passed, that we should maybe take it upon ourselves to put the signs up. And so the next step, like was reported, will be to try to work with our council members for this area to see if we can get, every meeting you'll see an ordinance for some kind of street sign. So I don't think this is necessarily out of line for us to be asking that the parish's boat launch. Great that people are using it, great that it's there for the public to use, but we also need our levees there for the public to be benefiting and using too. So I don't think this is an extreme ask of us for the parish for a few signs. So we'll be, Mr. Lorraine, I guess this is your notice that we'll be talking about this soon.
You gonna get us some sign?
It just takes a simple ordinance to take care of that. We do that all the time in Golden Meadow, Levee.
Agreed. Next, we have update on risk rating 2.0. As you guys know, y'all voted back in April, I believe, to join the lawsuit against FEMA. And that lawsuit was filed by the State Attorney General's office on June 1st. Pretty symbolic, start of hurricane season, to file a lawsuit. So there was a press conference held to make that public. There were several other entities that signed on, several other levee districts, several other parishes, as well as some entities in Texas, I know, and Florida, and a few other states were.
9 states?
Yeah. So we're not alone. We're not just whining, and like I think FEMA was probably assuming we were, just because we experienced the brunt of what the necessity for the National Flood Insurance Program is, probably more than anyone else. So we're waiting now on further instruction and updates from the State Attorney General's office on that. I know the Attorney General was planning on filing an injunction against FEMA, or against risk rating 2.0, meaning that we filed the lawsuit, but if they don't file an injunction to follow it, then FEMA gets to just continue implementing risk rating 2.0 until the lawsuit is done. Filing an injunction would put it in front of a judge to say, until this is done, you have to go back to the old way. And you can't implement risk rating 2.0 until we determine its legality. And not only would that stop this now, but it would also kind of force FEMA's hand to engage more quickly in this whole debate. So looking forward to that, and we'll be updating you guys as we get more information. We also had an update with the Corps of Engineers. Our project management team from the Corps of Engineers on the LaRose to Golden Meadow system came down a couple weeks ago just for kind of a meet and greet and an update. They really don't have anything going on in our program, but we took them out to see the levee and what we've been doing, because we have a new project manager that's going to be directly dealing with our stuff moving in the future. So to kind of familiarize her with what we've done and where we're heading. But then to follow up on that, this morning, Wendell and I went to meet with Colonel Jones in New Orleans and Mark Wingate, the Deputy District Engineer, along with Dr. Chris Dunn, who's the Chief in the engineering section up there. And we discussed a few things. Largely, I know Pisiol and Associates has been working very hard to get us into the Corps' rehabilitation program, which would, if we have an event that would damage our levee, that would, if we're part of that program, that would get the Corps the authorization to come in and repair damages that happen. some questions that we talked through today that I wasn't really comforted by the fact that the Colonel or Mr. Wingate didn't have the answers to was, I'm wondering, we get the rehabilitation program, but we all know that our levees are beyond what's federally authorized. We're only authorized to 13 feet in the southern end and 8 feet on the northern end. In reality, we're 5 feet above that. So if we do get a hurricane coming through, we get damage, and we lose, let's say, 2 foot of levee. Does the Corps say, well, you still have another 3 feet before we're concerned because you're beyond your authorization? Neither of them really had an answer to that off the bat. They both seem to feel like that wouldn't be the case, but couldn't confirm one way or the other. So they're going to be doing some research with their team internally to make sure that that won't be the case, that we are covered. The other issue I brought up was we know those elevations are to the 100-year storm level back when it was originally authorized in the 60s. That information has been updated several times over, most recently in the LAMP process. So we know, based on FEMA's study through the LAMP program, what the more correct and recent 100-year storm levels should be. And so my question to the Colonel was, well, how do we update that information for the Corps? Because they can only build up to what they're federally authorized to the 100-year storm level. So what can they do beyond that? We don't know. And so my question was, beside a PAC report, a post-authorization change report, which nobody wants to do, just ask Terrebonne Levee District how much fun a PAC report is, what are our other avenues for allowing the Corps to come in and build or rehabilitate levees that are beyond that 1965 level of 100-year storm level protection? Mark Wingate's response was he thought there would be an easy case to be made that because the authorization was to 100-year storm level, we don't necessarily need to go to Congress and get some sort of amended authorization to go to the new 100-year storm level. That if the Corps can recognize the new 100-year storm levels, that they'll say, well, we're authorized to that elevation. There are some questions beyond that in terms of how much capacity we have for allowable overtopping, and maybe we'll be allowed to go a couple feet beyond that 100-year storm level elevation because of our limited capacity to handle overtopping, not because of the stability of our levees, but because we just don't have the ponding areas inside the levee system like some of these other districts, like Terrebonne has significant capacity to be able to hold a lot of stormwater that may overtop their levees before it actually gets to any community, because a lot of their levees run through open marsh with interior ponding areas between the levee and where you actually have communities. So they're going to be looking into all of that. We do have a follow-up meeting with Jennifer Stevens and Pisciola and Associates and Dr. Dunn and his whole team on July 6th. So hopefully they'll have a little bit more information as a follow-up to those questions.
Nick, I have a question.
Sure.
We all know how notoriously slow the federal government is moving. If we get damaged and they're responsible for replacing it, how soon do they move in and replace it?
That's a very good
Do we
question.
have to stay a year or two before they start rebuilding? That's my concern.
2 years.
On Grand Isle, 2 years after the storm, and they haven't replaced the levee.
Yeah. Well, okay, but now you're bringing up another good point that we also discussed. So when you have an event, they'll do what's called the PIR, Project Information Report. That report is going to show them exactly what happened and why it happened. And like Mr. Wingate brought up this morning, they don't currently have the authorization to say, well, now we're doing this report, we know why it happened, so let's not only go fix what was there, but let's fix why it happened so it doesn't happen again. They only currently have the authorization to go and rebuild what was there before, not to do what, for lack of a better term, we'll call betterments to that system. Because they can't do that. They're not authorized to do anything further than what the study and the chief's report and the congressional authorization allow them to do. It's very frustrating. They get frustrated just as much as we do with how much their hands are tied by policy, but it's the reality of the situation. So there may be language in this most recent word bill that will allow them to do that. They're looking to see how much that language can be stretched so that they can do these, what we'll call betterments.
Would we be allowed to repair it on our own, or do we have to wait for them to repair?
That's a good question too.
You know, if there's all this damage in a limited area, we can come in with our resources and repair it, rather than waiting a year or two before the Corps comes in and does it.
Well, similar to the way we respond to emergencies with debris removal, or that we'll handle things internally and then get reimbursed later. That's a good question that I can bring to you. Any other questions on core updates? Okay, just to report out, we did have a special meeting, like was mentioned, on May 25th to terminate our contract in the D North ramp. I know GIS Engineering can shed some more light on this later in their report, but ultimately there were some questions between our engineers and the contractor, and some disagreements as to what the fill material for the ramp, where that was supposed to come from, and they were anticipating submitting a change order well in excess of what we would have even been allowed to do by state law, much less what we would have been agreeing to based on our understanding of how the project was designed. So you guys did have a special meeting to terminate that contract. This is more just an update for the record. GIS Engineering can maybe give a little more update on how that went and the closeout of that project moving forward during their segment later. We're also working with our attorneys and the landowners' attorneys on the E North, or Section E North. We have an agreement for a right-of-way on their property that goes through 2024. We're looking to extend that through 2025 because we do have some anticipated work there that you guys have already awarded a bid on. That should be starting. We're going to be given notice to proceed on June 26th to take material from pits along this canal here and stockpile it along E North here. That will then allow it to dry, and then we'll shape to raise that section of levee later. But we do need an approval to be able to extend that amendment. So if you guys would want to entertain a motion to allow myself or the president to enter into, or to execute that agreement for the amendment to the right-of-way.
I'm looking at that.
For the recommendation on general manager, motion by Mr. Ronald, second by Matt, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, guys. Next up is our updated emergency operations procedures manual. I believe you all got a copy of the updated manual in your packets tonight, or this afternoon. We did do some extensive updates based on our closure exercises on the exact procedure to follow for that, because it wasn't very detailed, and especially now that we're not going to be having the assistance of the sheriff's office under most circumstances. I think if we absolutely need them, they'll be there to help direct traffic, but we've got a much more detailed traffic plan and how to set out the cones and create those detours. Any other big changes? Not really. Most of the changes have been updating contacts for the different agencies. So, do y'all have any questions on this? But we do need a motion to approve the updates to the operations.
We heard the recommendation of general manager approve our emergency operations manual. Motion by Mitch, second by Roman Curall. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Next up is our auditor contract extension. Griffin and Furman CPAs, their contract is up with us. We did have the option to extend that contract after getting quotes. So you should have that information in your packet. We've had a good relationship with them. And so,
It's not.
okay.
How long is the period, for how long is the period is it?
1 year.
For another year,
Another year, 1 year at a time?
or is it 2 years? We can get back to you on that. We can, if you would like, we can, pending review, you can authorize an extension of that contract. We can get between legal and our president.
All right. contract with Griffin and Firm. Motion by Matt, second by Brian Marks. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Next is our amended FY '23 budget. This is just an update to show actual expenditures through the end of this fiscal year. So we would need a motion on that also to accept that amendment.
Heard the recommendation from General Manager, accept the amendment for year 2023 budget. Moved by Brett, second by Mr. Rama. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thank you. Next, we have on your agenda the Rose Flood Wall Vessel Impact Barrier. We did need approval to advertise for that project, but I'll defer that to Mr. Angelin's discussion later, so we can discuss that further during this instead of hashing it out twice. Office furniture replacement, we discussed at the committee meeting before the official board meeting, and you heard it mentioned in the executive committee minutes that a lot of our furniture was understandably destroyed from Ida with all the water damage, having sat there for so long. And so we did get state contract prices through Kali Office Supply locally that we don't have to go out and get quotes because that's already been done through the state contract pricing process. So we can use them locally, and it's, I believe, 48% off of the list price going through Kali. So any one of these items is well under, our spending limit without bringing to guns, but overall, because it's such a large set of purchases, we felt better bringing it to y'all to show y'all what our plan was and let y'all know. But like it was reported, we did get a check from our insurance company in the amount of $23,620 to cover our losses, and our total, as of some updates, ended up being $25,500. So we're a little under 2,000 over at this point. Now that does not include a phone system, and it does not include y'all desk that was mentioned earlier. That I did get some drawings over to PCO and Associates to see if they can clean it up. I just sent them the dimensions and kind of Joe was very gracious in saying he's seen a lot worse, so it made me feel better. But just a general idea of what we'd be looking at, so that we can go to some partners and get some quotes, what that would be to get y'all a new desk put in place. Because there's really no option that's affordable. We did some quick research online, and a desk about the configuration what y'all had, ordering through a company online, probably would have been over $20,000. I guarantee you we can get it done from a local carpenter for a very affordable price.
The one we had, decided that.
It was sitting in water.
Yeah.
It was.
Volleyball.
And just put y'all lords on the ground.
Yeah.
You'll sit on the floor. So we did salvage the logo that was on the front, so that'll be making a return. But
Okay, I don't know if we need to prove that now, or can we, building committee report, right?
yeah, y'all can do that later. And then, of course, for the meeting desk, like I just mentioned, here's my very fancy drawing of the boardroom and what our configuration would be moving forward. For our audience, you'll be happy to know that we're looking to have fewer chairs, spaced a little further apart, maybe a little more comfortable. But yeah, that's the basic dimensions that I got off of a previous meeting video. And based on the dimensions of the logo itself, I was able to figure out how big the desk itself was. So we're looking to go pretty close to what you guys had before. Hopefully you won't notice much of a difference. But we're also looking to have it separable, so we have 3 separate sections of the desk, and we'll have the whole thing on casters, so we can move it out of the way for whatever else we may want to do in that meeting room moving forward. I did discuss all this with Ben, so.
And the 30 by 30, is that the meeting room area?
It's,
Over the right, upper right?
no, on the right is a profile view of what the dimensions of the desk, so it'd be 30 inches deep, 30 inches high, the desktop, with the front of it coming up 6 additional inches. speaking since we haven't talked about, we do have a vendor passport system that y'all had used previously, and there are some microphones in there. Once we get set up and see how that sound is working, we'll be able to make a better decision moving forward as to if we need to spend more money on
Do
that.
you use window with y'all gigs, y'all can, you ain't got no microphone?
I've got a microphone, I mean, Windows may have a
Yeah,
microphone.
stuff, and it's good enough. I don't want y'all to play.
We don't need microphones, that's the problem. So we'll update y'all as we develop those plans with Israel and Associates, get some quotes. And the last item here is purchasing a document scanner. It's $650, so it's very cheap. Just wanted to use that as an opportunity to explain that in our Connex boxes, there's a lot of that storage room taken up by filing cabinets and a lot of documents that may or may not be the best thing to bring back into the building, depending on water damage, mildew, anything. But a lot of that we may not need to keep hard copies of. So Mary has been researching public records retention laws to seek to make sure that if we get rid of anything, we're not going to be getting rid of anything that we should by law be keeping a hard copy of, and that whatever we need to keep some kind of record of, we can scan in. Because of our contract with Bio Office machines on our copier, it costs us for every page that we scan. This would be a more efficient and more cost-effective long-term solution to be able to scan all those files that we have, to have a desktop scanner. And so that's what our idea has been to move towards that. So we have a digital record and destroy whatever papers are. So don't really need approval for that. Just wanted to let y'all know that. So if y'all have any questions, I can take those. But other than that, that's all I've got, Mr. President.
All right, thanks. Engineer report, CPRA, Stan.
The only thing I have is a note on section F burn improvements project. So I was able to confirm that the amended agreement has been executed, mailed to Lafourche. Should have been mailed June 1st. I don't know if you've gotten that yet. On section F burn improvements, all the funding is in place now.
Yes, yeah.
So Ty, he took over as PM.
Yeah, I've been very good at communication.
Right,
so,
that's great, yeah.
It's been a good relationship so far. Yeah.
But I think that's something in your report, honey. I think y'all are waiting on that to advertise. So we should be good to go on that now. So that's it.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, project engineer, Viziola and Associates.
Yes, on the LaRose Lock project, we submitted our calculations and our plans to the Corps for the revised location of the control house. We haven't heard anything from their engineering group yet about this. This is supposedly the last in a long line of questioning and us responding and providing calculations to them on this project. We are having the meeting, like Nick said, on July the 6th, and normally Chris Dunn can give us an update on that when we have that meeting.
Well, as of this morning, I did bring this question up to the colonel and especially with Chris in the room. Chris said it's out of their shop.
Okay, good.
So it's somewhere vertically up
It's
into the
in
chain.
operations now.
Yeah. So, but Colonel Jones committed to personally checking on them prior to that. So.
Hopefully that'll get this permit approval, and then we can move on to discuss funding from there. On section E North, levee improvements, this is, as Nick said, we're digging 3 borrow pits along the old parish levee line, and we're gonna deposit the material on the easternmost section of E North from the Clovelly boat launch all the way down to the southeast section, southeast corner. Construction Site Specialties was the low bidder, and he's the contractor. We held a pre-construction meeting with him last week. They have a good plan. We are familiar with their construction superintendent and project engineer. We've worked with them on other projects before, and they seem to have done done well on those projects, so it's looking good so far.
Who's that,
Construction site specialist. That's the guy out of Lafayette, young.
There was, Joe, if I can jump in, there was a question about them being able to access around here. You have this canal that runs along our borrow areas, and then on the inside, you do have an old levee here that the contractor was asking if we knew whether they would be able to temporarily degrade that levee, so to lower the elevation, but use that material to widen it so that they can we've got some pretty sizable tractors that have a good bit of width clearance they would need. So that's the only thing that we were really needing to know ahead of time. And so that's on them to be able to start those conversations, and they were planning on working up something. I don't know if they got that to Ben yet.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
So we need to present that to the landowner to make sure that he will.
But then after the project was done, they would reshape that levee what it was before the project started.
So we do plan on giving them notice to see for 2 weeks from today. And, they have basically almost 2 years to complete the project. 2 years. The next project we have is the Hurricane Ida storm damage repairs to the pump stations. Grand Isle Shipyard is the contractor. They're still working on some odds and ends electrical component replacements. They finished most of it, and they're honing in on finishing a few things at pump station number 1 and also at the Golden Meadow Locks. There's no pay application this month for this project. On the Hurricane Ida storm damage repairs to the main office, Grand Isle Shipyard is a contractor on this one. Also, they're working on interior painting, placing of cabinetry, air conditioning, etc. Things are going along slow. I don't think they'll be finished till sometime in July, maybe late July. Their final contract date was May the 10th, so they're already a month behind. They have submitted the application number 6 in the amount of $71,722.13. This pay application also includes a deduction of $5,670, which represents 21 days at $270 per day delinquent time. So we're already starting to deduct their time. So we do recommend that you pay this pay application number 6.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, you've heard the recommendation of engineer to pay GIS, pay request number 6 in the amount of $71,722.13. Moved by Mr. Ronald, second by Brett. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
And also, as Nick mentioned, we're working on doing some sketches, detailed plans to get quotations on the podium and the commission desk. We put out a request for quotation to do some repairs to the roof. We had a roofing expert come in and look at the screw patterns and how the flashing was tied down, and he found a number of things that he would recommend for us to upgrade. I think it'll be a minimal cost to you, but we are going to get prepared like a package, and we're going to get 3 quotes for that also to fix prior to hurricane season. It's mostly putting in more screws at the top and the bottom, and then from the sides, trying to get the flashing screwed down really well.
Joe, we put up that roof. We got, was it, what was it? Trident Industries, or Trident Roofing. And this is, we were trying to get the roof on right away as soon as we could. And they came in and did it. But, just as Joe, let's double check everything. But 80% of the roofs survived, other roofs, and ours didn't. We'd have been so much ahead.
Right.
And that rain got in, so we don't want to repeat of that.
Good idea.
I think it'll be minimal cost, and you'll get a lot more protection by doing this exercise. I recommend it. So those are the 2 things we're also working on for the main office.
I
Auto Limit Contractors, the contractor. His notice to proceed was May the 8th. He's been working on site. He's moved a lot of material. Last week he didn't do too much work because the site was pretty much wet from the rain in that area. I think if he gets another 2 weeks of dry weather, he'll have it done. Proposed elevation at the top of this levee is a +16. This is in one of the areas where we were overtopped during Hurricane Ida.
Where is this location?
This is just south of Loop, south of the brine pit, between Loop and where the Schwest Farm is on the east side. So he's submitted pay application number 1 in the amount of $109,908 even, and we do recommend to pay that.
Okay, gentlemen, you heard the recommendation of engineer to pay outer limits pay request number 1, the amount of $109,908. Moved by Max, second by Mitch. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
On the repairs to the Lee, Ontario lock flood wall and the loop flood wall, this is where we had scouring at the hard structures at the lock on the east side and then also around the loop high wall. Circle LLC was the contractor. His notice to proceed was given for May the 8th. So he's been working really hard. Everything is in place and everything is complete. All we need is for the grass. The job came out really well. He got out there and he busted his tail and got it done. So that's the kind of thing we like.
And they, all along, we said we weren't gonna put fabric down under so we'd have good grass growth. Initially, the contractor, whether he thought that maybe we left it out or what, decided he was gonna pay for the fabric and put it on. When I saw that they were putting the fabric, they already put maybe 10, 12 pallets of blocks down on top of the fabric. But we talked to the superintendent that was on site and explained to him why, and he was apologetic, very agreeable, and they ripped out and everything, started over, and it was a good experience, good contract.
And we do have a change order number 1. He had come in and recommended to us to put anchors around the edge and bury the edges. And we thought it was a good idea and it was fairly inexpensive to do. So there's a change order in the amount of $6,833. This is for the concrete anchors around the edge. I think it'll give you a lot more strength and prevent scouring the mat itself. So we do recommend that you approve this change order.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation of engineer to approve the change order number 1 in the amount of $6,833. Moved by Mitch, second by Roland Curall. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
And he also has pay application number 1, which is gonna be the only we're gonna get less, this is less the retainage. So it's for $345,665.70. We do recommend it.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation of our engineer to pay Circle LLC, pay request number 1, amount of $345,665.70. Moved by Mr. Ronald, second by Brian. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
We also have the certificate of substantial completion on the agenda for approval.
So we have to accept these?
Yes.
Okay. Heard the recommendation of the engineer to accept certificate of substantial completion. Moved by Mac, second by Mr. Ronald. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
And the last thing I had on the agenda was D South and the East Levee repairs. Compo and Sons was the contractor. He completed that project and we paid him out at last meeting, so that's all that work's done.
Any questions for Joe? Thanks, Joe. GIS engineering.
Hey, good afternoon. The East Bayou Lafourche Water Retention Project, we're continuing to work on that project. We are coordinating with Chevron right now. It's got a pipeline that runs from west to east in that area. Get us a letter of no objection. You know, as we move forward, we consult with Brian and Ray on not only those, but the servitudes as we move forward. D North Ramp project. As Nick mentioned in his report, we terminated that contract. We felt that the contractor's bid of $692,710 was a good bid, so we had y'all accept it. The contractor, after several months of work, said, you know, we're gonna send you a bill for like $1.8 million to do all that work. So we were taken aback by that, and that's when we asked y'all to terminate that for convenience. Basically, the material, actually under the blue banner, the levee continues on there. There was a lot of material there for the contractor to take. We told him to include that material in on the embankment cost, the material on the ramp, and he had not. So he was gonna ask for almost $1 million to take additional material, not only from there, but outside areas to build the ramp. And we thought it'd be best to cut our losses while we could.
I have a question, John, either you or our attorney. I'm confused with the term substantial completion. How can we accept substantial completion of something that's been, if we terminate the contract? Shouldn't be another word terminology?
There may be another terminology that we should use, but in our minds, the contract is substantially complete. Well, you're right, the project still has work left to be done, but that construction contract, since we've terminated, is substantially
But
complete.
she's received all this money?
He has not received all his money. The reason we have a substantial completion is his suppliers and his workers should still have the opportunity to file a lien for that project. So that's why we're going through the substantial completion process. Maybe there should be another term for it, but we didn't come up with another term, a better term for it.
Yes.
I mean, as far as we're concerned, there's an agreement between, you know, what was contracted for, but we're terminating, we're paying them for certain works done, and everybody's kind of walking away, you know, maybe not happy, but walking away
There's no
with
chance
what it
to
is.
come back later and say, look, I've completed it, and give a certificate, but you didn't pay no more money.
Not as far as we're concerned, based on the agreement to terminate.
Right, and at the end of the normal 45-day lien period, we will still be having retainage to pay him at that point in time. So we have three things in front of y'all today. First is pay request number 3 for $152,920.93, which covers, correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, all the work that we feel he's done up to this point. And up to that point, May 25th.
And again, who's the contract?
That's LA contract.
Okay, gentlemen, you've heard the recommendation from the engineer. Pay request number 3 to LA Contractors in the amount of $152,920.93. Motion by Matt, second by Brett. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
The second thing we have is change order number 2. This is in the amount of $9,550 for culvert grouting on the eastern side of the project. Luke had an old culvert that went under the road, and when we started the project, Luke indicated that they were going to remove that culvert, but they did not do that in time. So we looked at alternate means of getting that accomplished. So the contractor went ahead and grouted that culvert in. Luke has agreed to pay for that. So although it's going into this project, Luke will pay y'all back for it.
And how much?
$9,550.
All right, you've heard the recommendation of engineer to pay, for change order number 2 in the amount of $9,550. Need a motion by Mr. Ronald, second by Brian. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.
And then Mr. Ronald alluded to the substantial completion. We have added some language in it to make it clear that it's for the work that had been done up to May 25th.
So we need to accept that. Okay, you heard the recommendation of our engineer and our attorney, to accept this substantial completion. Moved by Mr. Ronald, second by Brett. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed.
Thank you all. Moving on to the reconnection of Breton Canal to Lafourche. I've got some additional slides for that. But basically, as y'all are aware, we're trying to get water from the bayou into the Breton Canal so we can flow back to pump station number 6 and get pumped out when the bayou is high. We have, over the last couple of years, moved towards a siphon project. It's similar to what y'all have on near pump station number 4 on the Yankee Canal. It is the most efficient way to move water from the bayou into that canal. It's also pretty safe. There's already a plug in that canal. If something happens, we can just shut the siphon and the water will stop flowing. It is a little bit more expensive than some of the other options, and you do have to have an operator on site to actually operate. As you can see, our cost estimate is $1.2 million or so. So one of the things that we looked at, and I know Wendell and Jimmy Badno have had this discussion for several years now, is to go with a weir. When we looked at the weir 2 years ago, we looked at a weir. First of all, a fixed weir we don't like because you never know when you need to shut it off. You might want to drop it or something. So a fixed weir that was permanent we didn't feel was a good option. So we looked at a stop log gate, series of stop log gates. We didn't like that option either because it would be very difficult to adjust. Even though it could be adjusted, it would be very difficult to adjust. Pulling out the top stop log or adding stop log, especially since when you're going to want to do that, it's kind of an emergency case, so it would be very difficult to do that. So we recommended not to go with that as well. In the meantime, we have found weir gates, which you've all seen sluice gates that you pick up and water will flow through a culvert. But this gate actually goes down so that water can flow over the gate. So it basically acts as a weir. And it's adjustable, but easier to adjust than the stop log gates. This is a little bit cheaper than the siphons, $150,000 or so cheaper. It's not quite as much flow, but that's something that can be easily adjusted. It's a push button kind of thing. For, of course, at a little bit additional cost, it can be a phone app kind of thing. We do not have that in here because we were trying to compare it to to the siphons. So we don't have that. Like I said, that was an extra $50,000 to $60,000 for that function. One of the cons to it is the plug that was there would essentially come out and replace it with a wall. Inside the wall, you would have one of these weir gates like you see on the screen. But the operation is pretty simple. It can be done pretty well. I think that we can move forward with a weir gate. One of the things that we at GIS Engineering would do is, at this point, we think it would be $150,000 less. We'd go through that preliminary engineering process and confirm that. If it's a little higher or a little lower, then we come back to the board and make sure that's how we want to move forward. But we would, at this point, recommend moving ahead with the weir gates. And at the next screen, we'll have a plan profile of what it would look like. because when you put the wall in place of the plug, you've gotta have the water come in, gotta have the water come out, there's gotta be concrete system, with riprap on the edges and wing walls and stuff like that. But we think we can make that work.
And it can be shut off at any time.
You can go and shut off at any time.
And
Push
we
button,
have-
like I said, the way we've got it scheduled is push button, you'd have to go out there and push a button. But it can be set so that you can
Remote.
do it from the office.
And where would it exactly be connected?
It would actually be at the plug itself, so as you go, you can drive out, see where the plug is. That plug would be taken out, and like I said, a wall would be put in its place. And in that wall, you would have a series of rear gates. This was based on two 10-foot wide rear gates. You know, that might not give us quite the, what we want to do to accomplish it, so we might end up with 4 or 5 foot gates, or 3 6-foot gates, or something like that, but that's something else we'll go into as part of our preliminary engineering.
Can you divide?
With the volume, it's a little bit less, you know, if you've had it all the way open, it's a little bit less than the siphon, but it's in that same ballpark.
A little more control.
Yeah, and it's controlled.
I guess we can rely on our engineers enough to give us advice.
Either option, I think in the end, is giving us more control than I had anticipated either one would, as how much we can load the volume in a 24-hour period. I definitely prefer, not to have it remotely operated. I'd like for our guys to be on site before putting any
I
buttons.
don't want anybody accessing it.
Yeah, and, I definitely prefer this design, having the gates coming up from the bottom, because my concerns for safety with the stop log gate, where if you've got a large slug of water moving through, you may not be able to, water has a lot of power. You may not be able to get that gate closed fast enough with stop logs. This removes that question completely, because the mechanism will be able to come up no matter. You also, we had talked about having sluice gates that would come from the top and close the system down. But if something's under the water that gets stuck, you can't close it, then you may not be able to take that out. So this design takes away any safety concerns I had about a weir. Originally, the numbers we had looked at were much lower for the original weir design. And I was a lot more convinced last week, which is an unfortunate position to be in today. But
And to give you an idea, we're at just over $1 million on the rear gate. For the rear itself, stop log, we were at 800,000. So yes, this is like 25% more than the numbers we had shared with Nick last week.
But I
You
would
also
not
have the
have.
cost- you also have the cost of having to dig out the canal.
You also have
More
the,
than to get
you
more.
potentially have the cost, which is, at this point, we're estimating as much as $750,000 to dig out the rest of the canal. We don't really think it would cost that much, being a little conservative, but it might.
And the dirt we excavate belongs to Alliance.
That's the easiest way for the district to deal with the dirt, is to leave it for the outlets, leave it off to the side for the outlets.
John,
Maybe you could negotiate something else with the outlets, that maybe they'll keep some and they keep some, but that's the
I know when
negotiation.
we talked about the siphon, the bridge was gonna be replaced and just filled in for a road, but the weir need the bridge replaced?
The weir, say that again,
That
Brian?
little short bridge that comes across right there, but that'd be left in place if we went with the weir, correct?
The Highway 308 bridge would. Yeah, and they would, when they come in and put culverts, we'll just make sure they size them properly.
Now, was I reading that right, that to open it or close it is a 2-hour long process?
Okay, let me back up one thing, is, I said it was push button, you can go there and push a button and do that. But there are also and means of opening and closing, if there's no electricity, for instance. that is the one that would take hours. To push button and raise it takes about 20, 25 minutes.
How about if there's a siphon, how long would it take it?
To start it, and Drake and Gordon, to start it, is in the same neighborhood, 20 minutes or so. Now to stop it, you just pop the valve and it stops. So,
John, can you speak to the discussion we had about the number of bracings and how this is different from the siphon that we currently have in place? Near pump station number 4, we have one bracing for the pipe on the outside, one bracing for the pipe on the inside. What the difference is between these two sites?
what Nick is talking in that top right picture, you can see every so often, if I remember right, it's 16 feet. There's basically a set of 3 piles that hold the steel pipe in place. We feel that's necessary to hold that in place without settling and stuff like that. You do not have that at pump station number 4. Pump station number 4, if I remember right, you just have 1 or maybe 2 on the intake side, and it is just out the rest of the way. You might have one, do you have one on the discharge side?
No, it's the pump down side, that's where you get the turbines, that's where the pumps at.
Yeah.
That's why we have the support on that back side.
Okay. So, yeah, so to keep those pipes moving on either side and do that, it's worked. Okay, it's been there for more than 20 years, it has worked. We don't think that's a very valid way of engineering that project, so we don't feel that comfortable with it. But that is something that if y'all chose to do, because what would happen is if you locked it on one side and the other, and then it settled, well, then that whole pipe would start bending. You know, it's big pipe, it's 48-inch pipe. The ones at pump station number 4, I'm sure have settled, but they have not interrupted its efficiency to a great deal, for sure.
Overall maintenance, down the road maintenance, this would be a better option?
Maintenance, it's actually the rear is probably a little bit better, maintenance-wise.
Less maintenance.
The
Greasing
rear
the
gate.
valve, greasing stuff. Would they have automatic greasing, stuff like that, or would we have to manually grease them? I don't know,
Okay, it is manual, it's manual greasing, so you'd have to grease it every once in a while.
John, did y'all look at, okay, so we gotta dig out the canal anyway. Did y'all look at utilizing that dirt, compacting it as best we can in that site, and maybe reducing the number of bracings that we need?
The existing plug you have is in pretty good shape. So with it does need to be raised a little bit, a foot or so. We were anticipating using adjacent material for that work. So you could compact it, and it's still gonna settle a little bit. So
What's the cost of those bracings? I mean, removing those, how much is that really affecting the overall cost of the project?
it was between $50,000 and $75,000.
For all of them?
For all, yeah, except I think the first one was last. Time on that, so we have time to do things.
All right. Thanks for the presentation.
But this, whatever option we end up wanting to go with, this is, in my mind, the top thing that we bring to either drainage district number 1, or if they're dissolved by that time, to the parish council to spend that money. Because that, whatever money is left, if the drainage district is dissolved before the money is spent, goes into a special account that can only be used for projects within the geographic boundaries of drainage district number 1. The parish has control over it at that point and what that money is spent on, but it can only be spent on drainage related projects within the
Remember,
boundaries.
drainage district number 1 goes up to Valentine, right?
Recent hospital on LA1 and right below Gaines.
So some of that money could be spent in the North Lafourche Liquor District, that's basically coming out of our district, watching that.
we have until next meeting.